Wow! G'day, mateys! This is WWE legend Bushwhacker Luke here. If you want to know anything about the past in wrestling, the history of wrestling all around the world, and get the scoops of the day, tune into WGD Weekly and listen to Steve The Scum. They're the ones to listen to for the top scoops. See you, folks. Whoa!
Hey, everybody. Welcome to WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum, Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly podcast. Thanks for joining us. My name is Steve, and with me is the nefarious Scum. I'd like to say it's going to be one hell of an explosive show today, brother.
Sure is, Steve. Glad to be here. Always a pleasure to be back with my longtime tag team partner. You know that that's you. Always a pleasure to be doing work alongside the class act, the great stuff that's going on with the boys over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. Explosive is a perfect word to describe what's going on today, Steve, because as you and I both know, we got the man who at one point competed in the World Wrestling Federation as Adam Bomb, former WCW Tag Team Champion alongside Brian Adams and Kronik. Steve, Bryan Clark is going to be with us today on the show. Pretty exciting, and like you said, pretty explosive.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about that. That is awesome. I know we got quite a lineup of guests so far, and a lot of things come here in the near future. I know we're going to get into that in a little bit. But before we go a step further, we have a huge piece of news to share with everybody that's listening with us. Thank you so much for everybody that gives us a listen each week and those likes. We really appreciate it. The numbers are growing each week. It's been great. But I'm going to let the Scum take over here for a second, take a time to take the special announcement. It's going to be some fantastic stuff. Are you with me, brother?
I am with you, and I am just as excited like you are. We're coming out of our shoes waiting to announce this one. Steve and I have both been working hard to make this show happen and to bring you the best in wrestling, and we are pleased to announce that WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum will be making its first live appearance, and it's going to be Saturday, November 30th at the huge Wrestle Cade show at the Benton Convention Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We're talking a huge lineup of stars for the Fan Fest during the day. We're talking a huge lineup for the live event. Guys like Dallas Page, Jake the Snake Roberts, Demolition, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Tommy Dreamer, Kevin Sullivan, Jimmy Valiant, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Rick Steiner, The Powers of Pain, James J. Dillon, the list goes on and on. Our friend, Buff Bagwell. And with WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum, right at our booth that day, it's going to be another one of our former guests, former ECW champion, Justin Credible, is going to be sitting front and center for all of our fans to come out and meet, right next to Steve, right next to the Scum. Pretty exciting, buddy.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I can't wait. Earlier this week when we were able to confirm all this stuff and we were able to go to WrestleCade's Facebook page, which everybody out there listening, give them a visit as well and take a look at the full lineup of performers that are going to be there. This is something pretty great, man. I know that it took a lot to get everything put together. We got Justin Credible with us for the whole weekend at WrestleCade, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, the Benton Convention Center in Winston-Salem, Saturday, November 30th, 2013. Go to facebook.com/WrestleCade. Check out all their information. They'll give you the information on how to buy tickets. There's a ton of different packages. Phone number is area code 336-831-0646. Give them a call, get that information, get your tickets, and come see us. Definitely pay us a visit. I'm sure we're going to have a bunch of stuff there for you guys to pick up, some swag, as they say, a couple things for sale, I'm sure, as well, Scum.
Yeah, and hey, who knows, Steve, with all the friends we've been making around here, you never know who you might see over at that WGD Weekly booth. Justin will be there throughout the day, meeting, saying hello. I'm sure he'll be doing some autographs and everything, but who knows? Maybe the irons in the fire that we speak of might surface down in Winston-Salem on November 30th. Maybe we'll have a little bit more for the fans. What do you say?
Oh, I can't even wait. I know we got a lot of things going on, and a lot of things have potential right now. So, well, it remains to be seen what actually we can do. It's going to be very interesting nonetheless. Whatever it is, it's going to be great sitting alongside my longtime tag team partner, The Scum, with Justin Credible all weekend long. I know that only good can become of that. We got Bryan Clark on the show with us today. It's a pleasure to have him here. I'm sure he'll be letting us know what he's been up to as well. Hopefully share some great memories of his time. I know he spent a lot of time in the WWF, but also WCW as Kronik, and he even got his starts back in AWA there, Scum. let's take a second to thank the fans for tuning into our show. We've exceeded our short-term goals, I think, Scum. I know we talked about earlier this week where we thought we were going to be in just a couple of short months, so it's fantastic, and all this is thanks to everybody that gives us a listen each week. We really appreciate it. Check out the best wrestling content on the Internet, Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. We're both administrators there. We both spend our time doing that. Of course, at our own page for Wrestling's Glory Days podcast, WGD Weekly, yours truly, Steve The Scum. We have our own page. That way we don't fill that page up with a bunch of nonsense. Facebook.com/WGD Weekly. We want to hear your input, guys. We're going to post the podcast each Sunday, as we always do, vary from time to time as to the exact time. I'm talking about maybe coming in within the next couple of weeks, maybe trying to get it earlier in the day. Let us know what you think. Is that a good idea as well? Facebook.com/Wrestling's Glory Days. Leave us your opinions on the show. We really want to hear what you have to say, don't we, Scum?
We sure do. We sure do. That's right. Check out the Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. Be sure and check us out, like Steve just said, WGD Weekly on Facebook for sole content involving the podcast. And as Steve was starting to explain there, I mean, you know what you're getting out of us here, folks. What you're getting, you're not getting your usual humdrum podcast where you got a round table of a bunch of people that never really had anything to do with the business. Steve and I are pretty secure in the fact that, first and foremost, we came up fans like you did of Wrestling's Glory Days, okay? I can vouch for Steve. Him and I have spent many an afternoon sitting around the television, many an afternoon sitting in an arena in our youth and watching. We don't come on here. We don't care who went out last night and got drunk and shit their pants in the corner of the bar, okay? We don't care who's cheating on who's arguing in the back room. We don't care about any of that. What we care about is bringing you the best from Wrestling's Glory Days, the best performers, and it's exactly what we've been doing. And, Steve, I think that our hard work and I think that everything that we've accomplished so far, like you were saying, exceeding those short-term goals, screams to the fact that you, the fans, enjoy hearing what you're hearing out of us.
I couldn't agree more, Scum. Wrestling fans are smart. They've seen a lot. Like you said, we've been around this business for a long time as a fan. We know every little swerving thing when it starts to come, and we're very surprised when we don't catch it. And I know a lot of you guys out there are the same. We know that. We're not going to try to pull the wool over your eyes with some of this craziness. We're going to give you the best of classic pro wrestling, just like my man the Scum said. Scum, we got Larry Zbyszko next week. And, you know, for the sake of being honest with our fans, you know, we do have to record things. And I will tell you this, trust me when I say you do not want to miss next week's show with Larry Zbyszko. We got Bryan Clark this week. We had Just Incredible, Bushwhacker Luke the week prior, the Hardcore Double Play. We move on to some of the greatest guests. Larry Zbyszko, the living legend, will be joining us. It's tremendous, Scum.
Yeah, Steve, again, I think the fans have been enjoying what we had to do. We sat down with Larry, and he will be Sunday, September 15th, and, man, you just don't want to miss it. A lengthier spot than we've done before, almost in the guise of what you would hear on a shoot interview. Over 90 minutes, the interview with Larry Zbyszko, and you can just imagine what's being talked about there. I mean, the guy feuded with his mentor, Bruno Sammartino. The guy was involved in the AWA. He was in Georgia Championship Wrestling. He was back with the AWA. He traveled all over the world, right up through the Monday Night Wars when he was sitting at the booth on Monday Nitro, right up to the present day. I mean, fans, you do not want to miss this one. It's something really special. Steve is real excited about it. I was real excited about it. And trust me when I say that's just the beginning. Because when I've talked irons in the fire, Steve can vouch for me once again, just like he always does. There are irons in the fire to the point that I turned around and I thought I was going to get hit in with a fireball in the face by King Lawler. Okay, those are the irons in the fire that we're talking here. Huge guests, huge names, and it's all coming right at you in the near future.
Absolutely, Scum. And, you know, we're doing this on the free here, guys. Not a penny. You go around YouTube and you want to hear shoot interview 90 minutes, and then you click on it, and it's a 30-second preview. Costs you $30 to listen to a guy talk for 45 minutes. We don't play any of that stuff. Go to iTunes, download our stuff. Go to TalkShoe.com/129237. And Download our MP3, throw it on your device, listen to it on your way to work. I know a lot of our longtime fans out there, our boys up in upstate New York, Mr. Fran in particular, always listening to us on his way to work, so we greatly appreciate that. Listen to us on YouTube at WGD Weekly at YouTube. We're all over the internet. You're pretty much, at this point, you have to avoid us.
Agreed, my friend. I mean, if you ain't finding us, you ain't trying hard enough. How many times can we spit it out and tell you? iTunes, YouTube, under our channel WGD Weekly, both of the Facebook sites, Wrestling's Glory Days and WGD Weekly. Check it out and enjoy.
You know, Scum, Bryan Clark joining us. Like I said, once again, he'll be with us today. And one thing I can tell you about Bryan Clark, man, that guy is still in top physical condition. You know, you're talking to the end of the Attitude Era WCW buyout. That was 99, 2000. You're talking 13, 14 years ago when these guys were in the prime of their life and still in top physical condition. I know Bryan Clark, he'd be someone I would definitely pay to see in the Royal Rumble, maybe face off against a guy like Sheamus or go chest to chest with Ryback or somebody. You know, that brings me to a point I wanted to make from that week is this. Scum, who from the glory days or from professional wrestling is still in great shape and aren't a complete mess? And you guys know what I mean out there. I'm not going to name any names, but listen, there's being in top physical condition to perform, and then there's dragging yourself to the arena, you know, half dead. Leave us a comment on our page, WGD Weekly. Who from the glory days of professional wrestling that are still in peak physical condition, mind you, and aren't a complete mess would you like to see back in the ring? And I know, Scum, there's quite a few people out there that you could think of and people that are trying to get themselves back into physical condition. But, you know, Bryan Clark stands out as one, and I know there's a lot of other guys out there that do as well. What do you think?
Well, again, I think when you say peak physical condition, I think you got to look at the age as well, Steve. You know, a couple of our recent guests, let's take, for example, that we've spoken with, to start off with, you know, for whatever reason, fell out of the spotlight, kind of. Buff the Stuff Bagwell was with us a few weeks back, you know, and for whatever reason, you know, things didn't work out after the invasion with him when he was with WWF briefly. But, you know, I know through everything that he's been through that right now he's working his ass off to make a comeback. You know, from all accounts that he told us, you know, he is back in tip-top shape, and he's trying his hardest. I mean, someone like that making a comeback, he's not an old man. He's early 40s, which is, you know, in wrestling, still in the prime of many people's career. Let's talk about our guest at Wrestle Cade. Just incredible. By all accounts, I mean, I have heard rave reviews about his work on the indies. I mean, he's back, he's clean, he's sober, he's looking to make a comeback. I mean, just like us, you can't look around Facebook these days without seeing what Justin's doing. He's got people that he's working with coaching. He's got his YouTube channel, Pro Wrestling 101. And every time that he's out, every time that I check out the matches that he's had in the independents, all I hear is, man, Justin Credible looks good. So, I mean, you got guys like that they're still young men that could definitely make it. I mean, when you said people in tip-top shape, I would think that they would fall into that category. How about recently we talked about on the show a couple of guys that we were seeing in a dream match that whether they're put together or not, the Ultimate Warrior, I mean, doesn't have the hair that he once had, but he looks pretty ripped to me in those commercials, you know? I mean,
yeah, he looked like he was ready to kill somebody.
Right. And who did we talk about hypothetically against him? And now all of a sudden, bang, he pops up and he's in the news that he might be looking to come back around WrestleMania time or at any time. Goldberg, again, I haven't seen much of him lately other than heard like the things he's had to say about being interested. I know there's a DVD from WWE coming up involving Goldberg. I'd be willing to bet that Bill Goldberg is in fantastic shape. I mean, he's a pro football player. He's always been very, you know, adamant about his look. So, I mean, there's two guys that we've talked about recently. I mean, everybody has been talking about the comebacks and the great strides made in their lives by Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall. You know, who knows how far that goes to when they get back in working shape. Maybe they make an appearance again. There's a lot of them, Steve, you know, and everybody loves a comeback. Everybody loves a great story, a feel-good story. So where more than pro wrestling is that evident?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, any of those guys that you mentioned could viably be, you know, a ticket seller. People are going to come to see the guys that we mentioned here, Bill Goldberg, Scott Steiner, Ultimate Warrior, Scott Hall, Jake Roberts, Bryan Clark, Of course, Buff Daddy, Buff Bagwell, and Just Incredible, which we're going to see him up close and personal, of course, at WrestleCade November 30th. I can't even wait for that. That's going to be some fantastic Scum. Scum, you're a regular fountain of knowledge here, so let's go to a little bit of a different subject matter, but along the same lines. Who from the glory days of wrestling that still work currently in pro wrestling do you find yourself turning into see? Now, I'm going to tell you a couple here that I like real quick, and I'll turn it over back to you. My favorite guy, I think, to turn into see every week, there's two of them that come to mind. Dutch Mantell. For the people that watch Raw every week and really didn't tune into way back in the glory days, Dutch Mantell is a guy that you may know as Zeb Coulter, the manager of the Real Americans or the All-American Americans, which I think I like better. But anyway, always a great promo, gets his guys over, does a great job in that capacity. Also a very, very creative mind. He did a lot of booking back at TNA. He also did booking with Jim Cornette in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. His pedigree goes back 30 years. He tells some great stories. He actually, on our Wrestling's Glory Days page, our intercontinental correspondent, Matt, posted not too long ago a story from Dutch Mantell at the beginning of his book talking about the Macho Man Randy Savage. Something to read there, certainly. And, of course, and another guy that is, you know, and again, we've had this argument as to when the Glory Days were, but he's a fringe guy when it comes to that. But he cut his teeth down in Tennessee, from Tennessee, big into politics now. Glenn Jacobs, Kane is my other guy that I love to tune in to see every week. Right now he's in some sort of an angle where it's taking him off TV with the Wyatt family, which is fine. Another good mix that I like. But Kane and Dutch Mantell immediately come to mind. I know there's a lot of other names out there, Scum.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. A couple of things first before I get into what you were addressing there. I appreciate the compliment when you said I'm a fountain of information. I thought it was going to go a different angle of that. I thought you were going to take the classic tagline and say I'm a regular fountain of misinformation. Hats off to Gorilla Monsoon, right?
Hey, when you're right though. You brought it on that segment, man. I can't say you didn't. That's right. And again now, thinking about it, folks, we got Stop the Scum a little later in the show, so he's obviously sharp today, so I don't know if we're going to be giving away anything or not there, Scum.
Well, we'll have to see about that when it comes up, but getting back to what you were saying earlier, and then when you touched on Dutch Mantell and Kane, right on your compass, let's say, with those two guys. I know you're a huge Kane guy, and I know you're a huge Mantell. Any savage that's out there like those two, I'm right with you. But my friend, I know where your loyalty lies there, and I'm not surprised to hear you say those two, and could not get a disagreement out of me on either. Personally, a couple of guys though that I think, you know, when you look at that you still tune into when they are there. Even though they've been around quite a long time. Couple of guys that aren't really necessarily full-timers. When do you hear a bigger pop on any wrestling program than when the lights shut out and the gong hits and the Undertaker walks out? I mean, I understand, you know, his body's taking its toll. Obviously, what's he been at 25 years as one of the top guys? But when those lights go out, it doesn't even matter if it's somebody else. When the lights go out all of a sudden on WWE programming, that place goes nuts. And it still does. And if you're at home, you still get the same feeling as when it was 1994 and all of a sudden the lights went out and Yokozuna was sitting there shaking in his, well, I would say his boots, but he didn't wear shoes. So you get the picture. I mean, it's never changed. He still has that effect on people. So why would he stop? I mean, you know, as long as he can go and he still loves it. The Undertaker, I would say, definitely fits into that category. Another guy that this ain't going to be a popular one, but people around the world, everywhere that he goes, every week in the live audience, not on the internet sites, but on the live audience, when that music hits and the big Hulkamania comes across the screen on TNA Wrestling and the general manager walks out, you cannot deny every week the Hogan chants and Hulk Hogan walks out. Again, say what you want about the guy. Arguably the most legendary figure, the most legendary champion ever, maybe the most recognizable guy in the history of the business. I'm indifferent. I've always liked him at this point for nostalgia. You know, I still enjoy seeing him out there. I know people say, oh, Hogan and Bischoff come in and they're ruining TNA and taking the spotlight. Who gets cheered louder than Hulk Hogan on TNA? Nobody. And imagine, Steve, I remember not too long ago you were discussing on the Glory Days site with someone in a post that I believe you may have put up. Someone had referenced, what do you think would happen if Hulk Hogan walked out on Raw? I'll tell you what would happen if Hulk Hogan walked out on Raw. It'd be the biggest cheer and the biggest pop they've heard since the last time he walked out on Raw.
Absolutely. Yeah, the building would probably explode. Hulk Hogan is going to be a draw in any building anywhere he goes. You're absolutely right. You know, another guy, and again now, not to take away from any in-ring abilities, any out-of-the-ring issues, we can't really avoid that, but what we can do is enjoy when he's in the ring. Kurt Angle, Scum. Great guy. Came around in the Attitude Era, Olympic champion. I heard him on Steve Austin's podcast not too long ago. Really, really interesting stuff. Talked all the way through about his history. And, I can base my opinion a lot having listened to him firsthand on there. That guy went through a lot. You know, he won the Olympic gold medal, another guy that broke his neck and won a gold medal. And that is all before his wrestling career. Comes into professional wrestling, and Stone Cold Steve Austin's on record as saying that Kurt Angle is the quickest study ever in the history of professional wrestling, coming from complete green to being the world champion in such a short period of time, and somebody that continued to bring it up to this day. And I know that he's a guy that, again, walked into a WWE arena tomorrow, and he's going to get a huge reaction. Internet, again, you know, everybody wants to be a judge of somebody when they leave the arena. That guy got a DWI. You know, it is what it is. He has to deal with it. He's got to pay his dues and deal with his family. But, you know, long story short, when he comes to the ring, he brings it every night. He's extremely entertaining. And there was a cage match on Raw with him and Chris Benoit that was unbelievable. And if you guys just watch the current product, so you watch TNA, Impact Wrestling, and you see Kurt Angle, what he does now, hit YouTube up or hit up WWE.com and check out some of his old matches when he was part of the World Wrestling Entertainment. It was fantastic stuff. A couple other guys, real quick, Scum. You know, guys maybe we might not think about. The Great Muta. He still works. That guy's been around forever and awesome performer. And again, now I'm not a big Japanese wrestling guy. I know our administrator, Ron, takes good care of our foreign needs and all your foreign needs out there when you're tuning into Wrestling Glory Days on Facebook. He's done a 10-part series on New Japan Wrestling. It's been very, very interesting. I know Great Muta, Kijimoto, I think is how you say his name, in Japanese wrestling. I know a ton about American baseball. I'll tell you a lot of stats. We talk baseball all day long. I know about 3 facts about Japanese baseball, and unfortunately, with Japanese wrestling, it's not much different. I don't know very much. I do know this, Scum. They've had matches in the center of the ring with like a 100-gallon tank of live piranha. I've seen that.
Yep, I'm familiar with that as well.
You don't get that stateside, right? You don't get that in the good old U.S. of A.
No, you certainly don't. You certainly don't. Whole different world over there, you know, with the fans and the in-ring work as well, you know, and but not in a bad way. I'm just saying, it's a different style.
Sure. Understanding. And you know, I was looking at the PWI 500. It's coming up here. I'm sure they're going to release it. I got a chance to take a look at that top 10 that was released. And again, now, I'm not being very educated to the stuff from the Far East. I think there were 3 Japanese wrestlers in the top 10. So there you go. I mean, certainly a worldwide phenomenon. And just because I'm a big dumbass doesn't make it super huge and very interesting for people to, tune in and check out. So, but again, the Great Muta, a guy from the Glory Days that I really, really like. And of course, Ric Flair's still around, Scum. He's out there wooing and chopping people at 3 o'clock in the morning at the bar still. What do you think about that, man?
Yeah, Flair still certainly gets that pop when he walks out. I mean, you can't deny it. There is absolutely no denying it. That Ric Flair, no matter when he walks out there, he's a legend. If somebody throws a chop in professional wrestling, what do people do?
Yeah, people scream woo.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's Ric Flair. I mean, the man is synonymous with a chop across the chest. I mean, there's not many people that don't. If you grew up in the era that we grew up with, or the era following we grew up with, you love Ric Flair if you're a wrestling fan. Plain and simple.
Absolutely.
I mean, hard to dispute it. And I mean, there's so many of these guys, Steve, when you brought up Kurt Angle, I mean, the thing about Kurt Angle, unlike some of the other older guys, and like you said, take his personal life aside. You mentioned the Benoit Cage match. I personally was in Boston for the Royal Rumble 2003, and there was a Kurt Angle-Chris Benoit match that absolutely stole the show. When the match ended, Angle did win. Benoit had got up. He was the last one out of the ring. It was probably about an hour long, the match, at least 45 minutes. And the place cheered Benoit, standing ovations, as the loser getting up hurt walking out of the arena. Another time that I saw, and another guy that I want to bring up that we didn't touch on, No Mercy, I believe it was 2000, maybe 1999, could be a little sketchy on the date there, when Angle had won his first world championship at Albany, New York. I was in the crowd. He beat another man that, say what you want about him, when he comes back, people tune in. That's The Rock, one of the most charismatic performers ever in the history of wrestling. Easily one of the top guys on the stick. Hilarious, still hilarious when he comes back. Went on to become one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Again, there's a guy, like you were saying, not necessarily way up there in age, but when he comes back, there's a big impact there.
Oh, you absolutely, man, absolutely. And you know, it's kind of funny as I'm thinking about it here, retroflecting on the Attitude Era and the era prior to that. But you know, when you look at The Rock, especially, you know, the two hugest names that came out of that era were Stone Cold Steve Austin, of course, The Rock. And it's a great example if you think about it. The two of them, The Rock being Vince McMahon's idea of a sports entertainer, and then you got Stone Cold Steve Austin, a self-made wrestler.
Yes, Stephen, to touch on another thing, while it's still fresh in my memory that you had just said, you brought up the great Muda in the international scene over there, and you also brought up ironically enough, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated 500, and the Japanese guys that are in that. Special announcement, another one, iron in the fire alert, let's say. We got a special presentation coming up from WGD Weekly that I know you and I are both excited about. We're going to be joined, you'll stay tuned on our Facebook page, WGD Weekly, to find out the date and time. It'll be coming up. We're going to be joined by Pro Wrestling Illustrated senior writer Dan Murphy, the brains behind the PWI 500 all these years. And he's going to come on, and he's going to discuss not only this year's 500, but he's going to let Stephen The Scum pick his brain a little bit, let the fans know exactly how that's done, how they go about through the process, and obviously answer some questions about who wound up where and why. Dan does the international report with Pro Wrestling Illustrated, so I'm sure he'll touch on some of those Japanese wrestlers that Steve was referring to, and I'm sure he'll also answer some questions as to, you know, the top 10 this year. That's a lot of controversy out there across the internet. As always, everybody's got an opinion, and everybody's always right. But here's the guy who puts it together. Here's the guy who sits down, and he's going to be coming in. He's going to grab a seat. Steve and The Scum are going to grill him on the PWI 500. Pretty exciting stuff, Steve.
Man, that's awesome, dude. I can't wait. I know that we were going to make that announcement today, so I was really looking forward to it, so I'm glad it's out there on the table for everybody. Please tune in. We'll have that announced very soon when that's going to hit the airwaves. We're going to record it very soon. A sit-down with PWI senior writer Dan Murphy. We're going to go over the whole PWI 500 very, very briefly. I'm sure we're going to spend most of our time on that top 10. I know I had a chance to look through it, and a couple of questions on there, so to speak, Scum.
Well, hey, funny you'd say that, Steve. Questions and answers, because speaking of questions and answers, the time has arrived, baby. Right after our interview with Bryan Clark, it's time to see who out there did their homework. It's time to see who could possibly walk with a free copy of Lex Luger's autobiography, Wrestling with the Devil. You know my take on that, Steve. I don't think anyone can do it, baby. But today, following the interview, will be our first two interactive giveaways, starting with Stump the Scum. Let me remind everyone out there that the Scum, he's not some hick, baby. The Scum is not some hillbilly wrestling fan that needed to go look up all his facts and do his homework. Because as you know, and I know, and all of our people out there in Radio Land know, the Scum has got the brains, baby.
Oh, brother. You know, we started this show, and it was going great, and everything was fine, and now this. I hope you're happy.
If I could remind you quickly, before we go in and we do the intro to our other contest, it's not my fault, Steve. You've seen it, I've seen it, and all of our listeners out there have seen it. The Scum is the latest sensation sweeping the wrestling radio nation, baby.
Oh, boy. All right, folks, we'll move on from there. I got my gimmick garage sale shortly after everybody can exhale slowly after Steve The Scum. We'll go right into the gimmick garage sale. I know we got quite a few pictures through here. I did pick my winner. My winner is out there, and I will share it with all of you at the end of this program. Steve The Scum, gimmick garage sale. Stay tuned. We got that right after this. A great interview here with Bryan Clark. We got Bryan Clark on the line with us now. Yes, we do. Scum. Bryan Clark, formerly of Kronik and WCW, former tag team champions, also known as Adam Bomb in the WWF during the New Generation era. Bryan, I know your time is valuable, so we'll get right down to business. Tell us about the early days of your career. Tell us about how you got interested in professional wrestling, where you trained, and how you ended up in Minnesota with the AWA with Vern Gagne at such an early age as the Nightstalker.
Well, you know, as far as my first interest, you know, I was interested, even as a kid, you know, I was hooked on it, and I always loved it, and so just, it was always with me. I actually went to my first match with my grandmother, if you can believe that, back when it was Florida Championship Wrestling. I'm from Florida, so went to one of my first matches with her. And as far as the AWA was concerned, they were basically on their way out as far as going out of business. Now, I was still in college playing college football for Central Missouri State, and I actually had not even been trained. I just Ox Baker, who was one of the first persons I was introduced to in the business, was able to get me a couple of shots with those guys on TV. And if you ever see them, you can see how green I was. I just was, like I said, I hadn't been trained. I was not ready. But, you know, being young and eager and being able to chance to get in the ring. But Larry Zbyszko gave me some great advice, you know, at the time. He pulled me aside and really told me I needed to get trained. And so I took his advice, and I got in touch with Jody Hamilton, who was down in Atlanta. And so I moved to Atlanta and got trained by Sarge and Jody Hamilton at what was later known as a power plant, but at the time it was basically just an old carpet warehouse, very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer kind of deal. And so that's how I got started.
Very interesting stuff. So Jody Hamilton being one of the assassins, if I'm correct.
That is correct, yes.
So, yeah, and you know, there's a lot of stories out there about what everything was like behind the scenes when ECW folded, when WCW went under, and I know that you could probably touch on that as well, being there. What was it like behind the scenes when everyone knew that the AWA, after about 30 years of being one of the big three in professional wrestling, was about to close their doors?
Well, you know, with me being so young and so green to the business, I really didn't understand it. You know, but so like I said, I really didn't understand the full workings, you know, the inner workings of the wrestling business at the time. So for me, it'd just be hard for me to comment on it because I just really didn't understand it. But you know, I just knew that I wasn't ready. You know what I mean? You know when you're not ready for something and not prepared, and I knew that. And of course, like I said, I was playing college football under a full scholarship at the time, so it was hard to juggle college football with pro wrestling. And so I knew that I had to, you know, I went ahead and pursued my degree and graduated, and then moved to Atlanta.
Very good stuff. Well, before we completely move on from that era, and interesting, I wasn't aware that you were juggling football and wrestling together. That had to have been pretty difficult. But before we completely move on from your time up there when you were in the AWA, I wanted to ask a question that would maybe tie a couple of your steps throughout your career together. In those same, like, waning days of the company that Steve was touching on, Eric Bischoff was up there working as an announcer. And, you know, eventually, obviously, you would come when you came in as Wrath and work for Eric years later. Being that you were both there at that point, I was just wondering, did you have any relationship with him in those last days of AWA, or it maybe played into you coming into WCW later? And if you didn't, could you speak at least of the impressions you had of Eric back in those days and how they maybe contrasted, if at all, from the guy that you worked for down in Atlanta?
You know what? We really didn't have a whole lot of contact, but he was always very professional, and I respected Eric, and I always got along with Eric. I liked Eric a lot, much better than working with New York. Eric was the guy that I could always talk to, and Eric did a lot for me. So I have, as far as anything bad to say about Eric, I have nothing bad to say about him. I mean, I always liked Eric.
Oh, very good, very good. So in any way, did the early days you kind of knew him when eventually he was in charge and you came down?
There was no real connection as far as what transpired later on. Actually, later on in Atlanta, because I lived in Atlanta and so did Eric. So fast forward a little bit. I'm sure you're not ready to get that part yet, but Eric was definitely interested in me, even when I was in WWF at the time. So yeah, later on he definitely had an interest in me.
Very, very good. It was just wondering, and again, personally, big fan of Eric as well. So I wouldn't don't have much bad. Hey, maybe that relationship will end you up down in TNA sometime soon. You never know, right?
Yeah, I guess you never know, right?
Right. So anyway, moving along and finally getting out of the AWA, but I guess not totally. Once that company folded, your next stop was still as the Nightstalker, but in WCW. And if I remember right, you came in and wound up replacing Scott Hall, who was the Diamond Stud at the time, and teamed with Rick Steiner at Starrcade against Vader and Mr. Hughes.
Yeah.
All right,
I recall that. Scott. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, Scott Hall was sitting on the sidelines crying about a little knee injury, like he always does. And there was really nothing wrong with him. He just didn't want to work. And so, I was still, that's when I was in the power plant training. And so they needed somebody to fill that spot. And, of course, I was the big guy that was in training and stuff. And so they put me in that spot. I really wasn't ready for it, but, I still did okay. I wasn't completely ready for it, but because Scott wanted to sit and cry about his little knee injury, because there was nothing to it. He was just ready. I think he was getting ready to go to work for Vince at the time. So he just milked it, and so I ended up getting put in that spot.
Very good, very good. Before Steve hits you with the next question here, just real quick, because we didn't touch on it, where did the gimmick the Nightstalker come from? Who comes up with that?
That was totally me.
It was?
Yeah, yeah. I came up with on my own, and I just sort of, I don't know. I guess there was an old series. Growing up as a kid, there was a Nightstalker TV series, and that's sort of where I got it from, the name at least. And then I picked a city out in Wickenburg, Arizona, so I thought that was a little creepy, and so that's where it came from.
Okay, cool. Just wondering. Pass it back over to Steve here.
Sure. Yeah, that's really interesting. I wanted to ask that question as well, at least answer that question as well. That's fantastic. So we move on from WCW there in the early 90s, and you make a stop at Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which, on a personal note, I was very entertained by some of that stuff with Kevin Sullivan, Dutch Mantel, of course, being down there. Very entertaining stuff. You move along late spring '93. You move to the World Wrestling Federation. You run there as Adam Bomb. But Smoky Mountain Wrestling, as everyone knows, was run by one of the most respected minds in wrestling, Jim Cornette. He featured a great mix on the roster, proven veterans, up-and-coming talent, just like yourself. It was maybe the last good territory in American wrestling. So, give us a little brief, touch on your time with SMW, and you worked that program like we talked about with Kevin Sullivan. And what was it like working with him? And he eventually turns on you. Big storyline there. But what I was wondering here is, can you speak to how valuable your time there was, not only working with great mind like Cornette, but to get hands-on experience in the ring with another great booking mind, Kevin Sullivan. What did you gain, or what did you take from your time in Smoky Mountain working with these guys, and did it help you, with your success later on down the line?
Absolutely. I can't say enough about how great Jim Cornette was. Also, not to leave out Paul Orndorff, because Paul was the one who got my foot in the door with Cornette. I had worked some independents in Atlanta with Paul, and so, I can't say enough good things about Jim, Kevin, and Paul. That they all were great. I mean, and Smoky Mountain was a phenomenal territory while it lasted. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Not afraid to bleed down there. I know that. Very interesting stuff. Kevin Sullivan is one sadistic guy. What was it like behind the scenes with him?
We travel together. I also travel with Paul. So, when I travel with either one of those guys, I was all ears, listening to everything, the politics of it, the locker room, just everything I could absorb from those guys, I did. And I asked questions, and, the long road trips, and it was just great to be able to get information from those two guys who had basically been there and done it all.
So far in your career, you've had one of the Assassins, talked under Vern Gagne, Paul Orndorff, Kevin Sullivan, and of course Jim Cornette. So you had quite the pedigree going on your way to New York and the WWF. This is a time where everybody has some sort of a comic book style gimmick, and you come in and you're a big guy, and I'm sure Vince McMahon had an idea for you. Or with the Adam Bomb character, how was that gimmick given to you?
Well, actually, he had a couple of ideas. He had the Ringmaster, which was Steve Austin's. That gimmick was later his. They offered me either the Ringmaster or Adam Bomb, and I chose Adam Bomb.
And that was coming in, and I think Harvey Whippleman had you when you first came in. Is that correct?
Actually, it was Polo, which was Raven.
Oh, Raven. That's right.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff. Chris, are you with me?
Yeah, I am. So, again, I didn't want to throw it with that great pedigree that you had mentioned, Steve. Another one that he had mentioned that must have been helpful was Ox Baker. That was from way back. That was another interesting influence that Brian had mentioned there. So, the names, what a list of names that you had a chance to work with when you were coming up. That's fantastic. So anyway, back to your WWF stuff. You have the look, you have the gimmick, and it seemed like the crowd was pretty into your character when you first came in, but it didn't really seem like they ever put you in that big feud or a lengthy program with anyone. So after a few years eventually there, you head down south to World Championship Wrestling, where you're repackaged as Wrath. First, do you think that the Adam Bomb character was somewhat underutilized in your WWF run? And if you do, why do you feel that was the case? And second, what were the major factors, or what influenced you to finally leave the WWF and move to WCW?
Well, it was definitely underused. And the reason I left, it was one night in the locker room. It was for the King of the Ring tournament. Pat Patterson and Jerry Briscoe came in and said, "Hey, Viscera, Mabel." They said, we're going to have you work with Adam Bomb, and Viscera's going to go over, or Mabel, and then Adam Bomb, we're going to put the Intercontinental title on you after King of the Ring. So I was like, well, that's great, and then they completely changed gears on me, and it didn't happen. They lied to me, and so that was that was the end of it. I said, I'm not real big on being lied to, And so I said, you know what? Bischoff's in Atlanta. He's already showed interest in me. I said, I'll see you when I see you, kind of thing.
Sure. Well, no one likes getting lied to. That must have been, what, King of the Ring 95 or so?
Yeah, I think it was an In-Your-House pay-per-view. I put him over clean. And, so I was expecting for them to honor their word and do what they said they were going to do, and they didn't do it. And so I said, you know what? I was on the road for 280 days out of the year, not making basically really crap money, and I was making 4 or 5 times the amount of money in Atlanta, and so I left.
Well, yeah, can't blame you there.
Yep.
Seems like a good move. So,
well, guys jump from territory, or promotion to promotion, and so that's what happened.
Yeah, sure. It was happening all the time then. Unfortunately, there's not really that outlet anymore.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, very slim.
Sure. So anyway, then you landed WCW. You wind up teaming with Chris Kanyon, who was under the Mortis gimmick, feuding with Glacier there. And shortly after that program, you get what I remember is your biggest singles push in either of the major companies, where you had that several-month winning streak. And obviously from the crowd reaction at the time on Nitro and on Thunder, the audience was definitely behind it. So towards the end of that...
go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No problem.
Well, I'm just saying that you're right. The crowd... What happened was they wanted to do a Mortal Kombat thing, and it wasn't working. And I told Eric, I pulled Eric aside, and I said, Eric, I said, let me do Wrath my way. I said, I can get it over. Just let me try it. And so he did. And I came up with a meltdown. That was all mine. I created it myself. And I went on an undefeated streak for like 6-7 months. I mean, it was over. When I hooked that meltdown in, it was just, people would stand up on their feet, and it got over. And they were building me for Wrath versus Goldberg. Unfortunately, one night I came up because I was a high flyer for a big guy, and I tore my ACL, and that put me out for about 9 months, and so that's what slowed that down. But Wrath as a single really got over strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it's funny that where you came in there, because part of what I was going to finish up with was it seemed like with that streak you might be heading for a showdown with Goldberg, who was doing the same thing, and then there you have it. That was in the plan. So that would have been fantastic at that point. I mean, both of you guys were on fire, and the crowd was definitely loving it. So that would have been real interesting to see. Also, toward the end of that streak, I think around that time, anyway, heading into the next year, there you worked a feud with Bam Bam Bigelow that wound up in a pay-per-view match. I think it sold out that year, maybe.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, what was it like working with Bam Bam?
Honestly, very disappointed. You don't really want to talk down or bad about people that are no longer here, but he was out of shape. He blew up really bad in the ring. I was really frustrated because, I take the business and always take the business very seriously. And he was not in shape and not prepared to go, and I was ready to go. And so it just didn't work out.
Yeah, it must have been frustrating. I mean,
Bam Bam was certainly... you put 110% into it, and then the other guy shows up fat and out of shape, and just, it takes two people to make it work,
Sure, and especially since at one point he was such a talent,
Yeah.
A lot of parallels between the performance in the ring with you and everybody involved in the match and playing live music, and I think that the Scum and I did a little bit of that. And when somebody doesn't come ready to go and everybody else is jacked up and ready to put on a good show, it's if anything a pain in the ass. So you get sidelined, you're on the biggest push of your career. You're on track to fight Bill Goldberg, and an injury sidelines you, which there's millions of instances out there that probably one of the biggest things to derail a big push is an injury. But you come back, and that was it decided right up front. You're going to come back as Kronik in a tag team with Bryan Adams, that classic two big guy, dominant ass-kicking tag team. You have really good success. It's the later days of WCW at this point, and you guys enjoy a few runs as the tag team champions. You're involved in many of the main storylines during the New Blood storyline that was going on. You and Bryan remain a team until the company's eventual demise, and then sometime after that, you're actually brought in during the invasion angle back to the WWF, and you feud with Kane and The Undertaker. But take us to the formation of Kronik, and whose idea was it to put the two of you together, and bring us through the time where this is one of your more successful runs is in the tag team ranks. And then, of course, fill us in on what it was like feuding with Kane and The Undertaker as Kronik back in 2001.
Well, during my time off, Bryan actually called me and said, "Hey, I got an idea. What do you think?" And at first I was like, I wanted to go back as a single, but the more I thought about it, the more it appealed to me. And so we did it. It got over. He came up with the name. He did the Kronik, the voiceover. We came up with the music. We flew down to Tampa with Jimmy Hart, put the music together. That was real big. People popped on that. And so it got over, man. Bischoff loved it. The whole company loved it. He even called us out in front of the whole company, a few times during meetings, saying, nobody's over here except Kronik. I was like, wow. That was a little pressure, but he, he really, he knew that we were over, and we were, and you could tell by the reactions and stuff. And then later on, after the company folded, then we went to New York. Well, I wanted to go to Japan, but Bryan and I were partners, and just like brothers, very tight, in and out of the ring. And so we, Bryan said, let's go to New York, give it a try. But the thing is that we had been out of the ring for over a year. And so, you get the ring rust, and I had an automobile accident and had a neck injury. Kane had a bad staph infection. Taker had been off for a while, and Bryan had been out of the ring. And so we had one house show, and then we were in a pay-per-view. And it's like, there's just, I felt like we were set up for failure. A lot of guys that left WCW and went to New York, that's what it was. It was just like, because we kicked their ass so many weeks in the ratings, I just think they had it in for us. And so, like I said, we were set up for failure, and that's what happened. So we didn't last long, and we actually finally got to go to Japan, which is what I wanted to do, and we had really good success in Japan, and I was very happy with that.
That's very interesting, and again, Bryan, you're not the first, you're not even the second person that almost verbatim has said that they felt that they were set up for failure immediately upon the closure of WCW into the WWF. So that falls in line with a lot of the other guys that we've spoken with their same exact sentiment. I wanted to thank you again, Bryan, for joining us tonight. We've just got a couple more questions for you. We'll keep it quick.
Okay, no problem.
You mentioned Bam Bam Bigelow, and of course, we talked about a couple other guys throughout the course of the interview, Chris Kanyon, Bryan Adams, none of those folks, of course, with us anymore. Give us a couple of stories and let us know what you think of these guys that are no longer with us, guys that you spent quite a bit of time with in and out of the ring, Chris Kanyon, Bryan Adams. Give us your thoughts and what your relationships were with these guys. I know you had mentioned that you were pretty tight with Bryan Adams.
Well, like I said, because the way Bigelow and I worked, we really didn't have much of a relationship. Same way with Kanyon. I like Kanyon. Kanyon was a really, really good worker. He spent a lot of his time with Vandenberg, which is Jim Mitchell. But Bryan and I were really tight. That's who I spent my time with, was Bryan. And man, I miss him every day. He was just. In my office at home is one side is college football, one is my Green Bay Packers, because I'm a huge Packer fan, and the other side of my wall in my office is all Kronik with our tag team championship belts and stuff, and just all the memories and stuff that in the U.S. and in Japan and stuff. But Bryan was he's my boy, man. He was one of a kind, great guy. Always kept me laughing, and always kept me in good spirits, even when because there were times when I was a hard ass and Bryan was a comedian. So, but that's just the way it was. And like I said, I miss Bryan the most, no doubt.
Was he a big ribber? Did he ever get you with any good ones? You got a good rib story?
Yeah. He never really ribbed me too much, but, there were so many ribs. He could impersonate anybody. I mean, he could call you up and you would think Vince was on the phone. I mean, he could do Tiger Chung-Lee. He could do so many people, man. It was just hilarious. He would have the locker room just rolling in the floor laughing. I mean, he was one of a kind, man. One of a kind.
Tiger Chung-Lee. That's excellent.
Yeah, I was getting a chuckle. I was always a fan of Crush Bryan Adams. Just picturing him doing a Tiger Chung-Lee like Steve. It
was friggin' hilarious, man. You just have no idea how much shit he would pull. I mean, he would rib Terry Funk, and he would rib anybody. It was just hilarious. He had me laughing so hard I was crying. So, there you go. So.
Those are the kind of friends that you remember fondly, right?
Oh, absolutely. Always and forever, man. No doubt.
Sure. Well, I get just a couple more here to hit you with, Bryan. A couple things I wanted to touch on. You have to step back a little bit here, but Steve was talking with you about your time as Kronik, which, again, I had mentioned I personally remembered that Wrath run as being your most successful. Now, certainly when you and Bryan teamed up and got the titles a few times during that relaunch period there in WCW in 2000. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about that period. Personally, I'm not really in the major populace, I would say, and that I enjoyed that period of WCW. Like Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff were there. I know you worked a lot on screen with Vince Russo, where you guys were kind of his henchmen, and then you were kind of feuding with him and stuff. You hear a lot of people, and they give the guy a kind of a tough time. Not much credit for anything, and an awful lot of criticism. I was just wondering your take, considering you work so closely with him. You've already talked about Eric, but what was your opinion of working with Vince Russo during that era?
Honestly, for the most part, it was very positive. There were a couple of bumps in the road. But I like Vince. I knew Vince because back in when I was in Adam Bomb, he was one of the writers for the magazine, so he did a big article on me, and so we got to know each other back then. And he pushed the Kronik gimmick really well, and so I think he took care of us. I can't really complain about Vince.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, I figured that's what you were going to say, and that was kind of why I was going there, and that you hear a lot of people come and say this or that, but again, remembering that era, it seemed like, you guys actually had a crack that you might not have had a lot of other places, so, I thought that might be where you went with that, but it's just interesting, you hear so many people say, not such great stuff about the guy. It was interesting to hear from someone who it would appear would have had a good relationship with him,
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Nice to hear that once in a while.
Yeah. And hey, not to say that there weren't some really goofy and crazy ideas that didn't fly. I mean,
Oh, so. Sure. But I mean, there were, the guy that was kind of why I bring it up is, that's kind of all you hear out of him. You don't hear about the good stuff, So it's nice to hear that once in a while. I think he deserves that, So, all right. So, last question that I wanted to hit you on. We just touched on Vince Russo. You told me about Eric Bischoff. So, you've had a kind of rare when you look at the collection of people that you've worked for over the years. Whether it was working under Russo, working under Bischoff. You said you were really young. You worked under Vern Gagne. You worked with Cornette and Smoky Mountain. Obviously, you worked for Vince McMahon up in WWF. Just wondering on all those guys, who was your favorite to work for? Why were they your favorite? And who would you say was your least favorite to work for, and why?
Well, you know what? I would say Cornette, just because he taught me so much. From everything from walking through the ring to props to the gimmick to just everything. I think, you know, like I said, Cornette's a brilliant guy. And Bischoff, because, you know, he gave me a shot and he listened to my input, which is very, very important to me. I mean, he listened to me when I said, you know, this Mortal Kombat thing's not going anywhere. Let me do Wrath on my own. He listened to me, and so that was huge to me, and I got it over, and then of course he loved it, you know, and then also the way he put Kronik over, you know, we did that on our own and got that over when a lot of stuff in that company was really bad. So those were the, you know, the positives. Vince, it was sort of up and down, you know, like, you know, just sort of, I'd say 50-50 with him.
Gotcha. And do you have any recollections with Vern Gagne, or was that kind of a little?
Not honestly, no, not really. I really never even really spoke with him. Maybe once, you know what I mean? Like I said, the company was on its way out. They were really short 30-minute segment shows, and you know, I was just breaking the business and really didn't know anything. I'll be honest with you. I was still just getting my feet wet.
Gotcha. What are you doing now, Brian? What does Bryan Clark do now?
Bryan Clark is in the casino business, and he is doing some acting, and he's also in phenomenal shape, and he's waiting for a call for the Royal Rumble. So that's what I'm doing. You know, there's a lot of guys, folks. There's a lot of guys that are saying, like Jake Roberts and Scott Hall and these guys that are, you know, I've never stopped training. I mean, if you look on my Facebook page, you'll see the kind of shape I'm in, with the look I've got. Adam Bomb could definitely come back and Royal Rumble in Pittsburgh in 2014 in January. Those other guys are not ready. They're not physically ready. I am. Just throwing it out there. So we'll see.
Excellent stuff. Well, we would look forward to that. And again, now with the Scum and I, we go way back watching wrestling together, and the Royal Rumble has always been a great one because you may know who's in it, but you never know who's going to come down the aisle next. So it would be fantastic to see Adam Bomb break the curtain.
That's right. You know, have the Creation of Devastation make an appearance, come in, a couple of meltdowns on some people, you know, and get it over. I'm not talking about full schedule. I'm talking about, you know, just a proper send-off, you know?
Sure. And like you said, you always were in, you know, pretty good shape there. If you're in that same shape and you walked in there and got that pump handle and scooped someone up for this meltdown, I would imagine there'd be some people out of their seats.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely capable of it. I'm telling you right now.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. I know that. Brian, if you could stay on the line with us, we'll wrap it up. We know your time's valuable. We really wanted to thank you for joining us today on the show, WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum. It was our pleasure. Stop by any time. Ladies and gentlemen, Bryan Clark, we really appreciate your time, man.
Hey, man, I really appreciate it. And also would like all your listeners to please take a look at my Facebook page. They're welcome to join. I've also got a eBay store open up, so tell them to take a look at that. There's some one-of-a-kind stuff on there, but they're more than welcome to join my Facebook page. Be glad to have them.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to get that out to all of our listeners and all of our readers. Scum, anything you wanted to add?
Nope, just wanted to say thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and listeners out there, you heard it from Brian, you know, go check out the eBay store, check out his Facebook page, and get the word out. Let's see Adam Bomb back in the 2014 Rumble.
That's right. All about breaking necks and cashing checks, brother.
Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. Have a good night.
All right, take care, man.
All righty. Bye.
Bryan Clark, what an earful we got from gentleman formerly known as Adam Bomb, member of Kronik, Tag Team Champions. A lot of good memories back along the way.
Sure. What a list of guys that he had to influence his work, from Ox Baker to Larry Zbyszko to Paul Orndorff and Kevin Sullivan and Jim Cornette. And, geez, I mean, boy, how could you go wrong there, right?
Man, I'll tell you what, and you know, we were talking about everybody had a gimmick when he came in. When he came in the WWF, that guy stood out. He was huge. I like the contact bit. You know, very rarely, if ever, I don't think I've ever seen at that point another performer use fake contacts. I know Kane does, a lot of other guys have since, and Jake Roberts had the gimmick die there for a little bit with the model, but he had those like I don't know what you call it, like mushroom clouds in his eyes. I thought that was pretty cool. Plus, he was just a freaking monster to begin with, and he had all those big power moves. I thought he was great in the WWF and definitely misused.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you know, Steve, he wasn't lying. I know you remember, because me and you would sit there in our living room and watch Nitro in that era. When he went on that run as Wrath and he came out with that pump handle into that power slam and gave that stare into the camera, people loved that. I mean, people would go, again, it's too bad. We were wondering when we were getting ready here about whether that streak was supposed to meet with Goldberg's streak. I've never heard that before, but that would have been a great collision at that time, man. Goldberg and Wrath, just two animals in there. You know what I mean? They both, you know, similar styles right at you. I think that would have been interesting.
Totally, and that's got me interested already. You know, I'm a fan of the big guys going at it. The guys that can move. I, of course, love Andre, have a lot of respect for guys like that, and Big John Studd. But guys like Wrath, like Bradshaw, you know, Brody, guys of that stature that could move and brawl, and they were just huge. And their moves, when they performed their big power moves, they sold them well because they looked vicious, and whoever was getting them really looked like they were getting folded in half. Bryan Clark towards the top of that list for sure.
Yeah, and I would agree, Steve. And another thing, you know, very interesting, you know, he said Pat Patterson and Jerry Briscoe had told him after he dropped that match to Mabel on the In Your House pay-per-view, you know, they planned an Intercontinental title run for him. I mean, now, I know since about the year 2000, that title, you know, 2001, has been kind of passed around like a hot potato. And, you know, a lot of the people now look at it and don't see it as the same. Heck, sometimes it's not even on the pay-per-view. It's on YouTube before the event. But at that time, you know, it was going around Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, Jeff Jarrett here and there. Davey Boy had a run somewhere around there, you know, a little bit earlier, like mid-90s there. And it was pretty prestigious then. I mean, so that you get your hopes built up for that. Like, wow, here it goes, Intercontinental title, and then never happens. I mean, yeah, I guess you would say misused. I mean, you don't blame the guy for jumping ship. And, I mean, even when he first came in, when he talked about, I thought was interesting, was, you know, they sit down, you and I have talked about that gimmick table. You know, you're at a bomb. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. The other one that they laid out for him was the ringmaster, like they gave to Austin. I mean, you got Bryan Clark, and I'm not saying that he's not a good wrestler or, you know, in-ring performer, but he's a monster. I mean, he comes in there and he's killing people. I mean, not that it could take anything away from the Adam Bomb gimmick, which, you know, again, could give or take. Everybody had a gimmick at that point, but at least that one was somewhat relevant to his look. I mean, I just can't picture him as the ringmaster.
I can't say I disagree with you there. It's, you know, and then especially in the wrestling industry, it seems that you kind of get stereotyped into a certain moveset according to how big you are. And again, it makes sense most of the time, but I think that having been given the choice between Adam Bomb and the ringmaster, and like you said, I think he made the right choice, quite frankly. And he had a couple of stints, well, not so much a couple of stints, but he had some time in the WWF. There was some time where you might have thought Adam Bomb was about to take the next step with that Intercontinental title. And again, what you were saying is it holds true very, very much that the Intercontinental title meant a lot back then. And the other thing is that there wasn't any other belts. Now you have, off the top of my head, I think you have 5 singles titles, right? 4 or 5 singles titles in the WWE. You only had 2. So, I mean, right. You were either the best worker in the company, was the Intercontinental Champion for the most part. And if you go back through from Shawn Michaels and look backwards, you can certainly say that the best workers were the Intercontinental Champion, and of course the big draw was the World Champion. And up until the Attitude Era, where they had the European title come out, the Hardcore title, a million other championships that kind of came and went through that era, when Adam Bomb was into the discussion to get the Intercontinental Championship, that was certainly a huge thing. I can't say I blame him for being upset having not had that come to fruition. Moving south to where he trusted a guy in Eric Bischoff, it was clear that they had a good relationship, so it seemed only natural that he would end up going there. And like you said, the run he had, his Wrath was great, and I immediately thought of Brutus Beefcake when he said injury, and I was like, oh, man, that sucks, because there's another guy that never really could call himself a main eventer, and right when he was getting his huge run, his huge push, he gets a dang injury. It wasn't politics. It wasn't the company got sold. It was a damn injury, and you could do nothing about it. And those are the worst, I think. And like I said, it reminds me a lot of the story with Brutus Beefcake, never quite able to come back and get a huge singles run after that.
Yeah, Steve, they definitely, Beefcake is a good one when, it seemed he was ready to take that IC title. Another favorite of yours and mine that I know you remember, unfortunately, had that career cut short by an injury when it looked like they were about to jump to the upper level with that motorcycle accident with Magnum TA. One of the best, not to say he wasn't like at the top of the card at the time, but, what a shame that career was cut short, Never forget getting that edition of Pro Wrestling Illustrated with TA on the front, and that, they talked about that motorcycle injury that ended his career. What a sad day for the NWA and the old Jim Crockett Promotions that was, because that guy was already a star, but who knows what he'd have become a couple years down the road,
You're absolutely right. And having happened in the 80s, it was hard to get that information in some sort of a steady fashion. And I know my memory a little bit vague, but I do remember watching those Saturday afternoon TBS runs, and I'm pretty sure Solely was still at the mic at this point and alluded to a terrible tragedy, but wasn't very certain or wasn't very clear as to the health or the actual fact of whether or not he was alive or dead. There was probably a week span where, and Magnum TA was certainly a guy I rooted for heavily back then. He was a huge star, and the guys that were around him at that point, Dusty Rhodes, Tully Blanchard, Nikita Koloff, all those guys seemed destined for greatness, and only a couple of them could say they ended up making it to that all-time great level. And Magnum TA is at the top of the list for all-time, damn it, I wish he made it, and bad stuff happened to him list.
Sure. Again, I'm faggy. We're roughly the same age. I'm faggy as far as the, that being brought about on the television programs. But I definitely remember getting that edition of that magazine and reading through it, and it had the pictures of the motorcycle, and it was, it was weird to see in those publications, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, and that group of magazines. It was weird to see a story that was that, again, everything at that point was played out as, as it would in storyline. So it was strange to see that in there, because there's no way that was part of some storyline.
Absolutely. It's certainly not back then. And again, just like you said, you have to rely on great magazines. Pro Wrestling Illustrated at the top of the list. You run down to the newsstand, Fred's News or Bill's Grocery. I know in our little hometown there's a couple of little hot spots for the wrestling mags to hit on the same day, every day of the week, the east side and the west side. If anybody's listening, you guys know what I'm talking about out there. Running down to the newsstand, picking up Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and of course, later on in the years, they came out with a PWI 500. Always great to get into some sort of heated debate with your wrestling buddies as to who should have been number one or who got robbed in the top 10.
Yeah, I honestly, Steve, I'm surprised that the Scum never cracked the 500.
Yeah, 501 your whole career. I don't know what to tell you.
That's right. Yeah, mid 500, 540, 538. Not everyone can crack it, my friend. We'll get there one day. We'll get there.
I hope so. I hope so, my man. I'll tell you what. We talk about all these things back in the day, and you're thinking of them off the top of your head, and you're talking about Vince Russo. I think maybe we were a part of or watched too many bags of Kronik on a pole match.
Sure.
To remember everything.
But funny that you would bring that up, because that was the last thing I wanted to touch on, and you started speaking about Bryan Clark, our guest tonight's relationship with Eric Bischoff. Kind of strange. It goes against the grain of what you usually hear across the internet and what you usually read. First off, Eric Bischoff, all recollections when he was running WCW, and again, maybe some of it's true. Again, you and I weren't in the locker room, which neither were most of the people who are sitting behind a keyboard and bad-mouthing the guy, for that matter. But at least we don't have any problem owning up to that. But you usually hear about Eric Bischoff as, he was the guy, and he was arrogant, and he was this or that, and he was the ruler with a iron fist. This is the way it was going to be, and the older guys got their creative and this and that. Now, Bryan Clark just told us that when the Mortis and Wrath, the Mortal Kombat wasn't working, he said, "Hey, Eric, listen, do me a favor. Let Wrath go over the way I want to do it." All right, give it a whirl. Guess what? It went over. Moving on, who else do you hear that? Even more than Bischoff. Vince Russo. Kronik. What did he just say? What did Bryan have to say about Vince Russo and Kronik? Yeah, there were a few silly things, which, again, we've been through this. There's a lot of them. But Kronik, Bryan Adams, and Bryan Clark, for the most part. I mean, Bryan Adams came into WCW when he left his crush, was thrown in the NWO, which, again, the NWO was great, but he was like member number 97. He was out there in tag matches with Stevie Ray and Virgil, and and that's pretty much all he did. Then he was B Team NWO Hollywood, and then all of a sudden, when Russo's there, he's got these two monsters. One coming off an injury, one that's just been completely misused and crushed, Bryan Adams, and puts them together. They put Kronik together. They get the team, and what does he have them do? What should they do? They went out and killed people. They went out, they had that double choke slam, the high time. They did all those power moves. Adams did the tilt-a-whirl, the backbreaker, and Clark had the meltdown. So again, a lot of people, Russo came up with this, and this gimmick was stupid, and he overdid this. Once again, Bryan Clark is the exception to the rule, folks. Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo had nothing but good things to say about him. Personally, I know, Steve, you'll back me on this. We both think that both of those guys did a hell of a job when in their positions that they had, and they're unfairly criticized to a certain degree, at least. And it's good to hear somebody say that about those two. You know what I mean? Because I personally, I'm a fan of both.
And it's funny, you were talking about Kronik, and you can't avoid mentioning, when you're talking about Kronik, at the same time in the WWF, and I know as a wrestling fan, and maybe some of you guys out there listening would agree with me, you've watched wrestling for a long time, and there's certain things that you see when they come out of the curtain for the first time, and you're like, oh, look at these fucking animals. Dude, when you saw Bryan Clark and Bryan Adams come walking out together, you're like, oh, yeah, these guys are animals. They'll kill people. Reminded me of the Acolytes. Again, two of the teams from that era that I thoroughly enjoyed, and again, huge fan of Ron Simmons' singles career, huge fan of Bradshaw and his singles career, but together as a tag team, they were a dominant force. Backstage, they were hilarious. I wish maybe that Kronik had a little bit more levity when it came to, that type of stuff as well. Maybe they could have even gone a little bit further in their careers. But you want to talk about a couple of teams from that Monday Night Wars Attitude Era that were just dominant forces. Kronik and the Acolytes both seemed to walk across the linear path to me, Scum.
Sure, Steve, that's a hell of a comparison, actually. And I remember thinking that at the time. I wasn't really thinking it when we were just talking to Bryan, but back then, that was a good answer on each show. Was the Kronik was kind of like the Acolytes, almost like the Muscle, the team that went out there and just kicked somebody's ass and then pinned them and walked back. They weren't always the champions, but they didn't always need to be the champions. They were here and there because, again, it's not very believable that someone's going to just come out there and have their way with Bryan Clark and Bryan Adams or Bradshaw and Ron Simmons, for that matter. But very good comparison. I remember thinking that back in the 2000 or around that time on watching Raw and Nitro. Like, you know, they, again, even though their characters didn't parallel each other, their action in the ring and just walking in and beating the shit out of somebody certainly did.
All right, that was some fantastic stuff. Bryan Clark joining us today, WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum. But enough about that, because it is time, folks, to play Stump the Scum. I know I am very interested to see if one of you readers out there sent us in the questions to Stump the Scum. I got a couple of them sitting in front of me now. Scum, are you ready to play?
Steve, I think you know, I was born, baby. I've been telling these people, these hicks, for weeks, that I didn't think anyone could stump the scum. So here it is. Here's your chance. Everyone's been saying, I've heard the feedback. All they want to do is shut this big mouth. Well, come on over and shut this big mouth. I don't think you can do it, baby.
Oh, boy. All right. That's enough of that. Let's get going. Let's play Stump the Scum. Here's our first question coming in from Nicholas Christopher from Westfield, New Jersey. Has one for you here. Who beat, and Scum, if you don't get this, I swear to God, I'm keeping the book. This kid isn't getting the book if you don't get this right. Who beat the Honky Tonk Man at the first SummerSlam in 1988?
Woo! Nicholas, please, baby. Maybe the most famous under-a-minute match in the history of SummerSlam. That would be the Ultimate Warrior, Steve. Not even close, baby. If this is what I got in store, please, let's bring on some competition here.
Well, he's absolutely right. Nicholas, you weren't able to stump the scum this time. We do appreciate you sending us an email. Do it again. We're going to have more contests in the future. Definitely send us in another entry at another time. So thanks so much for participating. Moving on, Sean Mahoney, the owner of the Sausage Shack from Fulton, New York, decided he wanted to try to stump the scum. And it's along the same lines. It's the same match, but it's a little bit of a different subject here. So let's move on to it. Sean Mahoney from New York. In 1988, the Honky Tonk Man fought the Ultimate Warrior, as we now know, for the Intercontinental title. But it was a last-minute change, or so was it. Who was Honky supposed to fight?
Well, Steve, I know Sean, and I think he runs a hell of a business up there in the Sausage Shack. But, Sean, maybe you ought to stick to slapping that sausage off your grill, baby, because the answer to this one is Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And just like the rest, my friend, I didn't think you could do it, and you couldn't do it, because I got the brains.
Oh, boy, I don't even know what to say to that. Sean Mahoney, thanks so much. And, folks, if you are in upstate New York, go to the Sausage Shack on County Route 3 in Fulton, New York. It's some fantastic stuff. Best cuts in town. Go pay him a visit. Very reasonable. And there's always a line, and there's for a reason for that. Go visit Sean at the Sausage Shack. Let's move on here. Question number 3. Arlene Wilson. Why and how, scum, did Randy Savage request a match against Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant for SummerSlam 1988? Do you understand that question?
I think that I do. And let me tell you what. Arlene Wilson, is that the name?
Yep.
That, of what I've heard so far, you know, I'm a realist, pretty good, and I got to be honest with you. That is a tough one. Here is what the scum recollects of that match leading up. This may not be what she was looking for. So she may stump the scum. And if she does, hats off to her. Here is what I remember of that. And if this is your acceptable answer, you be the judge of this, my friend. And I do not know how far back I need to go on this. What I recall is an interview with Macho Man Savage on the old platform on the Saturday morning television program. And I recall him being baited by Andre the Giant and Bobby the Brain Heenan. While he was doing that, he was attacked from behind by the $1 Million Man. And that, I believe, would be what planted the seeds there. Now, I do know that Macho Man won the title at WrestleMania 4 in the finals against DiBiase. And obviously there was the Hogan-Andre thing. Hogan was off television at the time. I do remember in the follow-up when Savage asked for the match and made the challenge, he said he would have a special partner. I remember the Mega Bucks, as they were called, coming back on the same platform, accepting the match, and then Macho Man introduced Hulk Hogan as his partner for SummerSlam. Eventually, Jesse the Body was the referee. I don't know if that's acceptable. That's what I remember of the angle.
Well, folks, if just talking about 8 months of television in 30 seconds is an acceptable answer, I know it is for me. He pretty much he set the table on that whole feud and as why they were fighting at SummerSlam 1988. So, Arlene Wilson, you weren't able to stump the scum this time. We really appreciate you sending in an email. Definitely stay tuned. Listen to us here in the future. We're going to have more podcasts to give away. But so far, Scum, you're 3 for 3.
Well, Steve, so was that the answer that Arlene Wilson was looking for?
No, but I know that's right. She didn't even send me an answer. So in actuality, you were going to win anyway because she never gave us an answer. But fortunately, she has two 40-something-year-old wrestling fans that remember everything. So, yeah.
In that case, Arlene, baby, I told you I didn't think you could do it. And just like all the other ladies out there in Radio Land, maybe next time before you pen down your question, after you get on your Wikipedia and try and stump the scum, maybe you could do what a lot of the ladies ought to do, right where they're on the same level, maybe even better than the scum or the guys out there. And that's getting back in the kitchen, baby, peeling the carrots, doing the laundry, baby. Better luck next time, Arlene.
Boy, Arlene Wilson, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Don't listen to this knucklehead. Anyway, we're going to move on. So far, the scum's undefeated, and I am so pissed off right now. I really wish one of these guys would stump the scum. Let's try one more. Kevin Hunsberger from Illinois. Who handled the commentary duties at SummerSlam 1989?
SummerSlam 1989, the second viewing, I believe, was from the Meadowlands in New Jersey. And if I'm not mistaken, this is also a pretty good question because it's tough, and if it's who I'm thinking, it would be a curveball. If I'm not mistaken, that would be the legendary Hall of Famer, Jesse the Body Ventura, and the eventual voice of WCW Monday Nitro, Tony Schiavone.
God damn it! You got it. I thought for sure he was gonna get you on that, but boy, you got it. Stump the scum, folks. Nobody wins. What are we gonna do?
Better luck next time, Kevin. Better luck next time, baby. Looks like I'll be sitting here and kicking my feet up on the couch, reading a little Lex Luger autobiography for myself. Steve, what do you think about that, baby?
Oh, man, I'm sure that's just what he wanted. He wanted to send us some swag to give away to our readers, and come to find out none of our readers could stump the scum.
Steve, if I could, though, Jesus, sorry, I don't know. Lost there for a minute. If I could hop back in here. I'm not sure what exactly went on there with Stump the Scum, but I've just been given a memo to read. We were donated these prizes. Lex Luger and his people were nice enough to give this to us, to give to one of our readers. So what I'd like to do is pick what I felt was the best question out of those and award one of our readers the book. So, Steve, right, we do have a winner this week, and the winner.
Scum. I wanted to. We'll redo this in 1 second. I wanted to ask you this. There's one more question in the mailbag here, and literally, folks, we're just getting off the ground, so we don't have a ton of readers, and we do appreciate everybody that follows our page. But in reality, we got like a half a dozen responses, and I've read pretty much every one except for one. And remember now, what the scum asked for specifically, folks, was nothing stupid about backstage this and that, or, you know, what color bandana Jesse the Body was wearing in 1987. And this question, and in my opinion, and in the opinion of our Intercontinental correspondent, Matt, whom I spoke with last evening about, we both agreed that this question kind of doesn't qualify so much as a really good Stump the Scum question for that reason. However, I wanted to read it to you, and I don't think this gentleman's going to be able to win on account of this, but the only way to find out is to get your opinion on the question, and maybe you can answer it. And if you answer it, then certainly myself and Matt were wrong, but we want to give the boy an opportunity either way. What do you say?
Yeah, Steve, let me just swap places here with somebody for a second. Yeah, hit me with it, baby. Let's see what
be disqualified. What has he got? Let me step in. Monsoon had a steak and a baked potato after the event in 1988. Is that the question?
No, but I'm sure you're probably right anyway. But here we go. This is SummerSlam 91. We're talking about the Mountie in the scene where he gets put in jail. And how many cops total were involved in finally putting the Mountie in jail at SummerSlam 1991? And now, here's the thing. Jeremy Staples, Auburn, Washington, he never sent us an answer. And I haven't looked it up because, like I said, I spoke with Matt last night, and we both agreed that it wasn't a valid question. But I'm going to throw it out there for you anyway and see if you know the answer.
What's his name? Jeremy Staples?
Yeah, yep.
Strangely enough, earlier this week, I watched SummerSlam 1991. So let me ask Jeremy Staples a question in response. Does he mean the police officers that took him from the ring? Or does he mean the police officers that put him in the paddy wagon? Or does he mean the ones that fingerprinted him, took his picture, and then physically put him into jail? All considered, pretty sure that there were 4 different entities there, but I'm not positive on that, depending on what he meant on that open-ended question. Either way, better luck next time, Jeremy. So our winner this week of Stump the Scum is Arlene Wilson with her question about SummerSlam 1988. I gave it some props to begin with. If she ever gets done washing her hands off and peeling those potatoes, Arlene, you can sit down and enjoy a beautiful read of Lex Luger's autobiography, Wrestling with the Devil.
What do you know? Arlene Wilson, Stump the Scum, winner of Lex Luger's book. What a great night. What a great first contest. And nobody was actually able to stump the Scum, but like we said, folks, we're not going to sit on the swag. We're going to let you guys, best we can, get you involved, get you these giveaways, give you these prizes. Stump the Scum went great, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks to the leaders out there. All kidding aside, that was fantastic. Jeremy, Arlene, Nicholas, Sean up at the Sausage Shack up in Oswego County up there. Thanks for being a part of the contest. All nonsense aside, those were all great questions. Honestly, that last one would have stumped me if I hadn't watched SummerSlam 1991 a couple days ago. So, I tell you, whether you qualified it or not, I'm pretty sure that that's your answer. So, good question. But now you know what you're dealing with out there, people. You're dealing with a guy who brings what he says he does, and that's the brains, baby.
There you go, folks. Stump the Scum. Stay tuned. I'm sure we're going to have another edition of Stump the Scum very, very soon. But now it's time to move on to my gimmick garage sale. And I only got a couple of replies here. Not a very popular segment, I guess. But, considering the fact I got a nice autograph picture of Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant sitting right here to my right, I'm happy to announce that I'm going to give this to Kevin Hunsberger from Carterville, Illinois. Kevin, thanks so much for sending in your picture for my gimmick garage sale. Now, what's going to happen here, folks, is the gimmick garage sale is very simple. I have an empty garage that I'm going to turn into my man cave. I got a bunch of empty picture frames here, and what I want to put up are some really cool-looking photos. And you can use Instagram. I think Kevin used Instagram here. It's really, really cool. You're going to see it on our show on YouTube. I'll have a picture of this put up. We really appreciate it. But what it is, drum roll, please, I guess, Kevin Hunsberger sent me in a picture, and I've never seen this before, Scum, of a WWF bowling pin set. I have never seen anything like it, and it's hilarious. Let me just tell you the guys that are involved in this one, okay? The 1 pin is Roberts, 2, 3 is Honky Tonk, Ultimate Warrior, 4, 5, 6, Hogan, Beefcake, Savage. And listen to this back row, 7, 8, 9, 10, Andre the Giant, Ravishing Rick Rude, and Axe and Smash of Demolition. So how psyched am I? Because we got Edie in this thing. We got Roberts. And now here's the one thing off of this. If I was setting up this bowling pin set, I would probably put Andre as the 1 pin because you got to figure that it would just bounce off of him. Or better yet, and this is a joke, so hopefully, Warrior, if you listen to this, and you're offended, you can get on YouTube and tell me how much of a piece of shit I am. But I'd maybe put you with the one pin because you probably wouldn't fucking sell the fact that you fall down to begin with when the bowling pin hit you. Cut-um-pump-ching. But either way, Kevin Huntsberger, I really appreciate this. Gimmick Garage Sale went over great. I'm going to put this up in my frame, and I'm going to send you an autographed picture of the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant.
That's fantastic, Steve. I forgot to mention Kevin, who also sent in the Shivani Jesse commentator question. So thanks to Kevin for being involved in both of our contests. We really appreciate it. One more thing on that Mountie question. I really hope that he doesn't think that we're including the Big Boss Man as one of those police officers. Well, because I suppose that would skew the numbers.
That's very true, and I believe it said verbatim now. Hold on. Let me get back to this. All right, Jeremy, how many cops? How many cops total? So cops total is total cops and policemen. Policemen are not prison security guards, so Big Boss Man does not count in that. So, Jeremy, if you were counting the Big Boss Man as a police officer, he never was to begin with. He's a prison guard.
How many cops total? And read the end of the question again.
Okay. How many cops total were involved in finally putting the Mountie in jail at SummerSlam 91? So he did write finally. So I guess if we were supposed to read between the lines there that it's supposed to be the final segment of how he physically ended up in the lockup, in the Huskow, in the convict college.
Right. Well, again, here's what I remember, and just to justify it, what I remember on that segment. 2 police officers helped the Big Boss Man get him out of the arena. Then he was put in the paddy wagon or whatever they called it. There were 2 when he got out. There were 2, and they were joined by another one. So it was the same 2 and then another one. And then he was fingerprinted, and then he had his picture taken, and then he was actually thrown in jail. So all things considered, all guys total, I believe the total number would be 4, being the 2, the one that helped him through the other things, and the police officer who drove the paddy wagons. But again, that's a confusing question. At that SummerSlam, there were segments throughout where the Mountie was shown being brought to the New York City prison. You know, I mean, you could say, there may have been other police officers in the background in the prison, right? But the way I'm reading that would be who physically helped put them, which would be the driver, the 2, and then the one other guy who physically put him in the cell.
And you saw this recently, so like one of the cops isn't like Steve Lombardi, right?
I didn't watch that closely, and I was just watching the event recently. But
the police officers were like Barry O. and Barry Horowitz,
real police officers. But as part of the show, physically putting him in the jail cell, there were 2 of them. All things considered, removing him from the arena, driving him, all those other things, there were 4 completely.
All right. Well, you guys, I'll be quite frank with you. I thought it was so vague with myself and Matt that we weren't even going to ask you anyway, and you certainly went above and beyond on that question. So, Jeremy, good try there, man. But it looks as though we went a different direction this time. Once again, Arlene Wilson, winner of Stump the Scum. Kevin Huntsberger, winner of Gimmick Garage Sale. We'll have all that up and posted on Facebook here very shortly. It's going to be Sunday when you guys hear this, so I'll have this up, I don't know, probably on Monday. I'll have it up on Monday for you guys, and we'll get it sent out on Monday as well. So expect your prizes in the mail, hopefully by the end of the week. As a matter of fact, however, Arlene, if you hear this, and again, I will contact you myself, but if you hear this, honey, you didn't give us your address. So you have to send in your address so that we can send this out to you, unless you want to come by the house and pick it up, which I'd actually be able to save us some postage. Anyway, moving on from there, guys. Stump the Scum and Gimmick Garage Sale, great success. Scum, it's about time to wrap it up for the night. What do you say, man?
Yeah, I do, Steve. And again, just because as my mantra that I don't need to do any homework and all that other stuff, all that aside, the reason that I was so specific on that last question is, it was a good question and it was a part of the show. So, Jeremy, I don't want him to in some way think that he was done wrong by Steve the Scum, because
when you do ask a question like that from now on, people, what we're going to ask of you, send your answer.
It sounds like a fair assessment. Quite frankly, I think we probably should have anyway.
If you're looking for an answer, and if there's some guy standing off in the background in a uniform, then maybe there was 5. Maybe there was 6. How do we know what you're looking for? So, again, we really appreciate it and hope that you don't feel slighted by that, because we really appreciate your feedback, and we really appreciate you taking part in the contest. All nonsense and funny stuff aside, it's you guys listening to us, as we said earlier, are helping us grow to what we become. So we don't want anyone to think they got cheated in any way. So we certainly welcome you to bring questions like that. And, I welcome them. That's part of the show. So, that is good stuff. And just wanted to explain, the vagueness of that made it a tough answer on that question. So, again, sorry if you do feel slighted. Better luck next time. Maybe, again, on another try, you can stump the scum, but if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. I don't think anyone can do it, baby.
Can't argue with you there, man. So far, you're right. But I think that's going to bring us to the end of one hell of a show. So many things great happened today. We got Bryan Clark, great interview with him, went over everything from his days as the Nightstalker all the way up through. And again, now, we talked about this in our recap, but, everybody was sick and beat up in that damn match. So give the Undertaker, Kane, Kronik thing a break. Well, yeah, all right. Enjoy what the rest of their careers, let's say, Scum.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you there. Lastly, Steve, Arlene and Kevin, enjoy those prizes. There's going to be plenty more next month coming up. Stay tuned for some more interactive features involving Stump the Scum and the Gimmick Garage Sale. We're going to ask Arlene and Kevin to do us a favor. We're going to include this in the email. What we would like you to do is take a picture of yourself with the merchandise and post it up on WGD Weekly on Facebook so everyone can see who our winners are and what they received from us. And we'd love to see it too. Congratulations to our winner, and that's about all. Winners, and that's about all I have to say, Steve.
Awesome, man. Once again, thanks a lot, Arlene. Thanks, Kevin, for participating with our contest there. We'll get our prizes out to you. Like I said, I'll get them sent out to you Kevin, I'll get yours sent out to you on Monday. And Arlene, as soon as I hear back from you as to where you live in the galaxy, I will make sure that I get that book mailed out to you ASAP. So far this week on our show, we told you we're going to go live. We're going to go to WrestleCade November 30th, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I expect any listener of this show that was anywhere near there to come out and pay us a visit. Definitely come sit down, hang out with us for a little while. We'll have plenty of people around our table, make it nice and comfortable for you. We got Justin Credible with us for the weekend. He's one cool dude. I know we've had a chance to interact with him quite a bit, so that's going to be some fantastic stuff. Plenty more to come. Scum, we got more irons in the fire than we can shake a stick at. We got the special PWI coming up very soon. Next week, we got the living legend Larry Zbyszko. So much going on. You don't want to miss it. WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum is your spot for the best of classic professional wrestling.
All right, have a good week, everybody. We'll be talking to you soon. You don't want to miss that interview with Larry. Steve The Scum will be taking a trip to Larry's Land next week. Have a good week, folks.
This is Bryan Clark, one half of the World Tag Team Champions Kronik. You're listening to WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum, and I'm all about breaking necks and cashing checks.